I am going to be showing how to make these picture frames out of some rough cut wood. This is maple. Um, there's some just some pictures that I had wanted to frame for around the house. Um, I got this maple from a tree at my last house. The tree was half dead and falling over, so cutting it down, realized the whole thing wasn't rotted out in the bottom. So actually, a buddy of mine was over helping, and we kind of cut a couple slabs out of the part that seemed okay. So I'm going to just take you through kind of how I mill up super rough lumber like this. So I'll use my chalk line to get a straight line, and then run that through the bandsaw. Um, and usually that'll give me a straight enough edge where I can use a fence and get start cutting it into board shaped pieces. So that's what I'm doing here. Now, because that reference isn't flat, none of these boards are going to be flat, and my technique's not awesome either through here, and my bandsaw is not super awesome either. So these are, like I said, just board shaped pieces. Um, but this is usually the process that I take if I got something real rough like this. I got a chainsaw, Alaskan style chainsaw mill that I have done the similar sort of process with. So now that I got a board shaped piece, I put it in that jig for my table saw there. And what that allowed me to do is clamp it into the jig, which is straight, and then I can run that through the saw, and now I have a straight edge. So at least one of the sides is straight and flat. And then I just continue that process on all the board shaped pieces that I have here. Usually, if I'm doing this like out of that slab, I'll kind of just mill up the whole piece because this process is messy and dusty and splintery, and there's bark, and so I just try to knock a bunch out at once if I'm doing this. So now I have that flat edge riding up against the fence, and what that does on the planer is it makes that corner at 90 degrees. So then I'll have two two faces of this board that are perpendicular to one another. And then once I have those two faces perpendicular, then I can run it through the saw, and then I can get straight boards. So that's what I'm doing here. And this, and a fair amount of my projects, I kind of guess at the size of boards and um, try to maximize the yield from the wood that I have. And then uh, that's kind of what part of what helps me determine how big of like in this case the picture frame is going to be. And some of the boards are thicker than others, and so I kind of chose some like size pieces. You could kind of see off to the left hand side of the screen here. There's some bigger pieces. So then now what I'm doing is measuring. You got my stop there, my cross cut sled. Um, Gonna start roughing these out to length. Um, I got another sled for miters, so gonna get them to rough shape. And unfortunately, I lost the footage of cutting those. But this is my miter sled that I built recently. Um, and the way these sleds work is that sled is built at 90 degrees. And so if I do one half of the miter on the left hand side of the slide and the other half of the miter on the right hand side of the sled, then when I glue them up, they'll be 90 degrees. So this may not be a perfect 45 I'm cutting here, or on this side either, but whatever they are together is 90 degrees. And so what I'm doing here is measuring this out, and then I'm setting I got a stop in the back that's got a 45 in it. So the 45s will sit nicely on that stop, and then I can cut these to length. And then obviously these are rectangles because they're picture frames, so once I get the short sides cut, then I'll move the stop and cut the other side. So doing a little cleanup here, and then what I'm doing is laying these frames out and trying to get just pieces that I think look good next to one another, and fitting them up, make sure that everything's going to work here, and selecting the pieces. I had a couple extra pieces just in case I break something, and then now the glue up. I'm using newspaper here to keep glue off my saw and my outfeed table. Newspaper's not the best choice for this. I normally have a roll of a paper that's on the side of my outfeed table that I use, which is just brown, like masking paper, which is way better. The problem with the newsprint is if you get it wet, sometimes you can get the print dye on your project. So better to have something else. But so that nail gun you see me using in the last clip, I had a couple blowouts, and this is kind of how I take care of that. I cut the nails flush, as flush as I can get it, and then I take a nail set and then pound it in a little bit so it's below the surface, and then take a little bit of wood filler and fill in the hole that way. You could kind of see in on the ones that I'm not sanding on currently in this picture, there's some wood filler, and then sand all those down, and now I'm starting to finish. Same thing here. Newsprint's not the best choice for this. It would be better if I had a better backer, but you know, wood or cardboard would be better, or some sort of solid paper. Anyway, that's some spray on. Satin polyurethane is what I'm using here. And I do the other side. I did a 3 or 4 coats and then let it sit for a day. And then this is the next day. I think the next day, or maybe later in the day, same day, 3 or 4 coats. And once that dries, what I'm doing here is drilling some holes that'll accept just a washer. And I'll show you how this is going to work here in just a sec. But I built that jig strictly so I could get all the mounting hardware in the same location on the frame. So when I hang them, they're going to be symmetrical. And then this is hardboard, is what this is. I think there's different names for it, but that's what they call it in the hardware store that I get it at. I get it at Home Depot, and that'll be the backing. So now here's the washer, and these washers are for 1/4-inch bolts, flat washers. So taking some 2-part epoxy, and I'm going to epoxy these washers in, and then the screw head, when I attach these to the wall, will fit in the washer, but not slip off. So there's the washer. You can see why I have the recess now, and see that'll just fit in and hold nicely on the screw. It's a really inexpensive way of doing it. It's maybe not the best way, but that's the way I do it. So now I'm putting the glass in, and so what I do, I find the cheapest way is just to go to the dollar store and buy really cheap frames of the size that I want to use, and use the glass out of those. It seems like it's cheaper than actually buying glass and trying to cut it or having it cut. So that's kind of what determines the frame size, that and the size of wood I have. So that's where that glass came from. And now I'm using, I think the package said glazing points. These are like glazing, if you don't know, is installing glass into windows. These are obviously not windows or picture frames, but that's what I'm using here. They're called glazing points. Picture points or glazing points, I think, is a pretty normal thing for picture frames. And then I'm showing you here a couple different ways to put those points in. One of them is just with that putty knife there, and you could swap that out for a flathead screwdriver if you had a big enough screwdriver. Pretty easy. Not awesome, it's not super easy, but you can definitely get it done. And then this is just a tool I made for this project. It ended up working pretty decent, and that's kind of real time right there, how long it took to put those points in. So you can see that the putty knife didn't take a terribly long time. And so now I'm just kind of getting those started because it was quicker with the that homemade poinsettia. You can buy poinsettias off Amazon or any of the woodworking websites or stores. They'll have those, but the cheaper ones I was seeing was around $60, and that just seemed like a lot to me. So these clamps I modified from a pair of Harbor Freight clamps, like $5 or $6, something like that. So seemed like a much better solution to me. But you gotta have a way to cut metal and a way, weld a piece on so it's wide enough for those points. Anyway, there's the first picture done. So do the same thing on the next ones, and here is the final project. So that's mom and dad, and the first frame, and that's my big brother in the second frame, kind of an older picture, and then me from a very long time ago. So anyway, thanks for watching, and please hit the subscribe button if you haven't, and hit the like button, and have a good day.